my colleagues told me, Martha, women aren't leaders. And that lit my flame because I could see around the community for all of those years, there had been many, many, many outstanding women who had done things, but they just didn't fit into the category of Webster's description of what leader means. So that became how I was going to do this work.
Martha May Mertz, what gives you energy?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Any kind of a challenge that I am met with, I don't call them problems or issues. I usually, if I'm drawn to them, I call them challenges. And for me, a challenge is something that will require a big step from me. And I think I might have learned about challenges when I played Monopoly with my father as a 10-year-old, because you had to take risks and you had to determine what your best step would be. So taking a risk is something that I've always enjoyed doing if I think I can get to where I want to go. I think that the best part of energy for me is having a vision for something that I want to work on and taking the step toward doing something that will bring about a positive outcome. So
Absolutely.
brainstorm ideas, finding people who are collaborative thinkers are all part of that. But it is the idea of meeting up with a challenge that maybe I've never looked at before, but I'm going to take the step forward because it's intriguing to me.
So we've talked about this offline in terms of, in 1982, you started an organization which has become almost a revolution, a global movement. And the story is really interesting. Would you mind sharing the story of how this all got started?
Well, there's kind of two different points of beginning. One was when I was 3 years old and my little brother was born. And he and I had a great time growing up together, but I learned that he had an entirely different menu for what was possible in his life than I did. And as time went on, I started to question, why was that? What was it that society thought of my value or what I could offer to as far as I could reach? And why did society think that his potential was so much different? So I think that I came to my life's work when I was 3 years old. The other step was when I had started a company. People didn't believe women headed companies at the time, so that was the big risk and challenge. And then shortly, maybe a couple years after that, I was asked to join the Chamber of Commerce in Lansing, Michigan. And there's where I realized that, being the only woman on the board, by the way, I realized that there needed to be something done to change that, because I could see that my ideas were not always in alignment with my colleagues. And yet when you're the only one of your type, it's pretty hard to get a message across. So I wanted to bring more women on the board, and my colleagues told me, Martha, women aren't leaders. And that lit my flame because I could see around the community for all of those years, there had been many, many, many outstanding women who had done things, but they just didn't fit into the category of Webster's description of what leader means. So that became how I was going to do this work.
So we know what lit your flame. On the flip side, question number 2, what drains your energy? Or do you have a pet peeve? Or what drives you nuts?
I'm not good at too much routine. It dampens me. If I have to face a whole pile of the same, I can't bring the same energy to it all of the time, or the same kind of adventurous spirit or inventive thinking. And those are areas where I have the most fun spending my mental time. So if it's a lot of routine, or I could also put into that category accounting. If it's a lot of numbers or a lot of routine, I'm going to get buried.
Well, I'm laughing because I think there's probably a lot of folks who are listening to this now who can absolutely relate And it's a segue to the next question, which is really twofold. Is what do you love the most about your work? And on the flip side, what do you like least?
Okay. Well, what I love the most about my work is seeing progress, having an impact. I think that's the thing. And my work has been, I could put it into two different categories. One is that I built buildings when I was in my company in the middle of Michigan. And that was something that women didn't do much of, and but it was a challenge and it was exciting. And I found the right steps to take in order to be able to take a small step and then launch it into a larger step. So that was something that I just loved because that's tangible. You can see a building. Oftentimes I thought, I'm painting the landscape of this area for the next 100 years. It had better be beautiful and meaningful and architecturally significant in some way. So I loved doing that. And coming into this work on establishing Athena International, again, that was small steps, making an impact, finding people who are creative thinkers to be with and to be around, and brainstorming and coming up with potential ideas that we ultimately would put into practice. And I've just had the most privileged opportunities to work with people who are so inspiring and so deeply passionate about their calling and so on. So for me, that's what I love the most about my work. It's creating something, it's making a difference, and it's working with people who every one of them has had a huge impact upon me as I've learned how to be who I am.
Brilliant. Thank you. There's a quote that you use often. I'm going to share it here. I just love it. It's a quote from Plato. What is honored in a country will be cultivated there. And you shared a great story about when you realized what the great work of your life would be. If you had to describe it now, you're a rare breed. You figured it out early. So if someone asked you, what is the great work of your life, Martha, what would you say?
Well, I would say that I stayed kind of close to that quote. What is honored in a country will be cultivated there. Because when I was told, and I saw in so many interesting ways, that women weren't considered to be capable of doing the kinds of things that women were doing, they just weren't noticed. That was when I realized that I was going to be able to lift up one outstanding woman each year in the community in which I lived. And that would be an Athena recipient, much like what you described as an honor that you have received with good reason. So lifting up one as an inspiration for others to see this is a person like them, somebody they might be working elbow to elbow with in professional life and so on, but that person was a leader, that person had found a way to express herself and to gain the admiration of others because of the work that she was doing. So I'd say that my biggest inspiration and the thing that I've stayed with in terms of values all these years, and it has been quite a few, is the idea that if you honor something, if you honor the potential of women in the community for leadership, then others will be drawn to become leaders. And that was an inspiration for me.
Thank you.
Good for Plato for thinking it up in the first place.
Indeed. On your website, www.marthamertz.com, www.marthamertz.com, there's a beautiful phrase that you mentioned where the work that you're doing, it actually goes beyond gender to speak to anyone who's leading in the 21st century, that anyone can embrace this way of leading. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I would love to. The common understanding about what leadership looked like when I first came and sat at that chamber board of directors was sometimes it was the tallest or the most, the loudest, or the person with the highest title in the room. And that was the person at the head of the parade, let's say, what leadership looked like. And it mostly at that time was title and position. So women didn't have such positions or titles in those days, but they were still doing things. There were a group of women in my community, Lansing, Michigan, who had put together the first hospital for the area. And they'd worked together. It was a collaboration, and they'd convinced people to do things in order to make this hospital happen in that community. And it is now a regional powerhouse there, but nobody thought to turn around and identify the women who were really the visionaries for that. And but there it stood in all of its magnificence and service to the community. So the idea of finding those voices and lifting them up, one each year in each community, was very appealing to me at the time, and it has remained kind of the passion in my life.
Definitely, and I've been witness to that. I can offer attestation, and I've loved watching the board meetings. I've learned a lot from you, Martha, and for folks who are listening, they might be able to relate to this. Your persona is that you've got it all together, that everything is working perfectly, that there's never been a misstep, that it's all just perfect in every way. Have you ever had any doubts or freak out moments about the great work of your life?
That's a good question, because my major freak out from the very beginning, when I wanted to talk about this and do something about how women were leading, was that I was not at all confident about speaking in public. Now, that's an issue that a lot of people will and understand and be in alignment with me on. But I was just an absolute case in terms of speaking in public. And if I hadn't been so passionate about what I wanted to say, I never could have come to a comfort and being able to express myself to a group of people. Part of that is that I just didn't have the confidence that my ideas were valuable. I think a lot of people start with that. What do I have to say that will add value to the conversation? And so I can remember standing up at a local, very quality department store after hours. Women had been invited, and I was going to speak about this Athena idea. And I started to speak, and I wondered why I was feeling lightheaded. And I finally realized before I fell off the podium that I wasn't breathing. You have to pull in, you have to stop and give yourself a chance to oxygenate. And I wasn't doing that. I was so eager to hurry up and say everything I wanted to say and get off that podium. So my big problem and freak out place was public speaking. And it's interesting now for me to look back and say that one of the things I have so impressed upon others, especially younger women, is the need to find your voice and then to speak your truth. But finding your voice would have been how I would describe what I needed to do, is give myself some credit for having valuable thinking that was worth sharing. And then find a way past the fear to the fun of sharing your ideas and seeing that others can align themselves with your thinking, or listening to somebody else's ideas and being able to describe those as having been impactful for me. So finding my voice, it was something that was very hard for me, and it sounds like an easy thing, but I could build buildings and I could sit on that chamber board and I could do a lot of things, but put me on a podium and I would forget to breathe.
Never in a million years would I have thought that was the case, because I've seen you speak many times. It's amazing to hear that. So thank you for sharing that, really. Yeah. I know a lot of folks can relate to that for sure. So Martha, big question for you. How do you define success?
Oh, that's a good question. How do I define success? I guess it is working with others, collaborating on something that we care about, putting together a plan that evolves into a movement in a way. I think I define success as being to be heard and valued for the ideas that I have and that others have shared with me over this time. That I look back now and see the importance of being able to keep the values in front of the people with whom I'm working, keep my values in front of them too. And that I'm going to just make a little second note about the answer to that. It's also finding my values and ending up liking the person that I was becoming, have always been becoming. Ending up seeing that the values that when I was on the spot, or when there was something difficult, or when there was a crossroads, that the values that I could bring to the table were strong and solid. And I think that's probably how I would define my own success in my life, is taking a strong look at who I am and liking that person.
Absolutely, and having conviction for the great work of your life. That being said, if you had to do it all over again, what would that look like, and why?
Well, I wouldn't change much. I would love to have some of the skills that you have in terms of public relations and great presentation and very clever capabilities of expressing things with few words but memorable. I would love to have had consultants along the way to have helped me achieve some of those things. But, we all can't be good at everything. So I salute your capabilities and other people who come along on a path that I'm on, who have talents that I can only dream of. But I recognize those and I admire them. And I've always been drawn to people who wonderful skills that I don't have, but maybe I can learn something while I'm in their presence. And always that's the thing that I would like to do. I also have one other idea, and that is that I would take more time to enjoy the whole process, because there were steps along the way that were hard. I've already said I liked challenges and so on. You get up to here with the life that you've got and all of the things that you're doing, and it passes too quickly. So I think that one of the things I would do differently is just to sit back and relax and recognize this is, as hard as it is, this is what I love. This is the pool I jumped into. This is why I'm doing the things I'm doing in these ways, because I would stop to enjoy it more. I do that now.
You do. Bravo. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. That's great advice. It resonates with me very deeply, for sure. And I'm looking at your beautiful book called Becoming Athena, which is available on your website, marthamertz.com. And if I may read the 8 principles, you mentioned it spurred me to think about, one of the principles, celebrate. There's also giving back, build relationships, foster collaboration, live authentically, learn constantly, advocate fiercely, act courageously. These are the 8 principles in the Athena Leadership Model that you built. Would you say that there's a superpower in there for you? Can you draw on? You have many superpowers. What do you think is your superpower?
No, I think that we find different powers along our life path as we need them. So, there are times when I have been a fierce advocate for this, which I have believed in so deeply. There are other times when I've been in a position to give back and leave a different legacy in some way. It might be very small, insignificant, or it might be a major step. So I think it depends upon which chapter that I'm in. But the one I'm going to say is what I consider to be the most important value among those 8. And they were arrived at research. We had a grant from the Kellogg Foundation to answer the question, how do women lead? Because it was pressing upon us. And what I learned when we finished that research was that living authentically is really the one that is of such a core importance in life. And it's not the same. The way I live authentically now is not the same that I did when I was, let's just say, working with engineers and architects to build things. It required a different kind of sets of decisions and so on. And I think that when a challenge during those times comes along, we might find that we have to make a decision based upon our values rather than what's going to be most lucrative for me, for instance, or whatever. And so we keep changing as life dishes up different circumstances for us. But asking the question quite constantly during life, who am I? What do I value? Am I living my values? Is of fundamental importance, I think, for everyone, especially someone whose voice is going to be heard above others. And the reason I'm saying that is because if we think we have these values and we're not living them, if we say this is who I am, but I'm not doing those things, then I've put a space between myself and my truth or my words. And the last person to be able to see that is oneself. Everybody else can see through not living their values. So the idea about authenticity is, I think, fundamentally important, regardless of what stage in life one is in. And then one more little PS, my goodness, I'm good at that, is the idea of celebration, because it goes back to what I was just saying. We need to stop and give honor to the moments that we have spent with other people in our lives, in tough circumstances or in wonderful circumstances, but just to stop and recognize that that was a singular time, won't probably ever happen again, and the same cast of people won't be together. And that's why it's important to celebrate the humanity of our work and time together. Mm-hmm. So celebration is always a good one.
Thank you. And it's a great segue into the next 2 questions, which I'm really anxious to hear your answer to. So the next 2 are really to get some insights into who is Martha May Mertz. And the next question goes like this. What do you know about yourself?
I lost your, to be absolutely true. Is that what you said?
You know about yourself to be absolutely true.
Okay. When I was very young, 5 years, a lot of things happened in my early years. When I was 5, I fell out of a car, fractured my skull from ear to ear. My parents had been driving to an Easter celebration out of state. They took me to the local doctor. The doctor told my mother, "I'm sorry, your daughter is dead. Take her home and bury her." So having that kind of thing happen in your life, I've read my own obituary from that time, leaves a person with, as I've grown up and older, with kind of a survivor's syndrome in a way. So my absolute truth is that I thought that I am still here, that I survived that intact. My brother used to tell me that I'd lost half my marbles, but that was my brother. Is that I needed to make a difference. I survived. It's a survivor's syndrome in a way. Since I made it through that, I need to do something with this life that I've been kind of given on a second basis to make a difference. And it could have had some kind of maybe unconscious impact on choices that I made through my life that I might not even still be aware of. But I think that that's something that I absolutely know about myself. I'm a survivor.
You're a survivor, yes, and your core values run deep and you have conviction about the great work of your life, definitely. I did not know that story, Martha. Thank you for sharing that. Gosh, so given that context, these next two questions are really going to be interesting for the audience listening. Is there a book that inspired you to behave or think differently, to live your life differently? Because you and I have talked about how we only get one chance at this life. So we might as well take on the challenge and find our voice and do what we were meant to do. How about you? Is there a book or even a favorite quote or motto that you live by that you could share with us?
You know, I've read so many great books, and I love to take the wisdom and try it and apply it. But I'll say maybe Virginia Woolf's book, when I first read that, A Room of One's Own. I have also been inspired by Maya Angelou. She came to a conference that we put on, an Athena conference, and she and Harry Belafonte took the stage, sat in a quasi-living room setting, and talked about all of the things that mattered to the people 2,500 people in the auditorium were breathless in listening to this conversation. And then I read her book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And it's another kind of a story that I'm telling a little bit about my life. But she had to learn how to express herself and to give herself latitude to write about things that people didn't even talk about, write about aspects in her life that had been almost absolutely devastating. And yet she found a beautiful way to express those things and to provide inspiration for other people. So I've always been moved. I was moved by her presence and that conversation, but I've been incredibly moved by the way that she wrote about those things. Not poor me, this is what happened. It was, this is how I took steps to become the Maya that you see now. And that was very inspiring to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that. Before we go into our last question, our bonus question, wanted to ask you about what you're most proud of. We've talked about the women's way, recognizing a woman's way. And you have often said what's important isn't just that women lead, it's how they lead. And you have advocated for recognizing this quote unquote women's way for what it is. It's a distinctive, transforming approach to leadership. And you, with the organization Athena International, you've built programs around that to that end. We were talking right before we got on this call about how could you share the program, some more about the programs that have evolved as part of the great work of your life?
The teaching of this model, first of all, finding this model, consulting with people who had expertise in leadership has been really the gift that I've received from a group of experts, but then spent many, many years trying to give back in ways. So the model is the gift. And I would say that I've suddenly lost your question. I got so engrossed in what I was thinking, I went in a circle.
Oh, no worries. What are you most proud of?
I guess it's that. See, I think that women don't often stand up and take credit for what they've done, and so I wasn't going to identify what I'm proud of. But it is this model, and it is the impact that this has had on various different demographics and populations. We originally studied women who were high achievers, people who either were on their way to doing something pretty significant or already had. And so that was a certain population, and we would teach this model to them. They could rearrange their thinking about what leadership actually looks like. It's not necessarily, as I said at the beginning, a title and position. It's influencing others to a point of view, a perspective that they will agree with you on, but it's also how to do something about that fits within the pattern that you want to represent in your life. And I think that's the thing I'm most proud of. But let me just tell you that I didn't see the impact of that to the same extent until I had the opportunity to teach it in a women's prison in Arizona. And there I realized that the impact of this model was capable of changing people's lives, of really letting them ask the question, who am I? And find the value that they had maybe never been told about, that nobody had ever empowered them to understand about themselves. And when they managed to look at the things that they had to do, the new chapters that they could write in their lives, people were changed by that model. So I've seen it empower girls and young women in college, just very big. It empower women who are finished with their education and go out into the world and find that they still have questions. And how do you do this part? And a lot of times they can get their answers by taking the time to understand themselves, to expand their capabilities, to know what they're really passionate about, to know that they have the courage to show up when something is required of them, and to give back, to make a difference with their work in some way, so that the world is a little richer for having had them find their full potential and utilize it.
Definitely. And for folks listening, if you're interested in programs, www.athenainternational.org is the website for Martha's great work, where you can learn more about her Global Cafe, which is an extension of the Harry Belafonte, Maya Angelou
that's good.
Fireside Chat. It's very powerful. I highly recommend attending the next one that's coming up. We talked about PowerLink and some of the women who the trajectory of their lives have been changed through PowerLink boards that are assembled for women entrepreneurs to help them grow their businesses, sell their businesses, get to the next inflection point. There's some quantifiable outcomes that are really impressive related to PowerLink. The podcast is fantastic. The Women Really Mean Business podcast, another great asset from Athena International. And then, of course, the Athena International Award. The recipients come from all walks of life. Did you want to talk a little bit more about that? There's NASA astronauts, there are senders, there are global leaders, just amazing women.
I do. The original Athena idea was meant to change that boardroom that I talked about at the beginning of our conversation. It was meant to change the thinking of the people within that boardroom about women as leaders. It resonated so much at the time. It was clearly other communities from California all the way to New York started inquiring about what is this Athena idea and how can we establish such a thing there. And the Athena Award was the leading effort. It was lift up one person who would be an inspiration for others to also achieve their full potential. And it started like that. We now have global awards for people whose life work has had a global impact. And it is a great privilege of mine to have had the opportunity to, in some cases, to present these awards, in some cases, to have the chance to meet these people and get a sense of who is this person. I'll speak of one that's coming to mind right now, and that's our recently deceased Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's a very tiny person. She was dignified and eloquent. She was she had a wonderful sense of humor. She was very she was humble. she would never talk about her greatest accomplishment unless she was pressed to do that. And then she would, because she also had the passion for what that was. But I've had the chance to meet some really international, important people who have done some incredible things that have impacted the world. And that's an Athena Global Award. But you know, Mary, an Athena recipient is a recipient. So at the beginning of this program, I talked about your being an Athena recipient, and you've already achieved what is required for that person to be. And let me just tell you what the criteria for an award are, if you have the time. It's one, you must be a person who has achieved the highest level of professional excellence. It doesn't matter what the profession is, it's just the excellence. And two, you must be a person who has given back in some way to your community or to your sphere of influence, given back in a way that makes a difference for them. You can see some of these coming from what I've already talked about. And the third one that we set up, this was 38 years ago, if you can believe that, was that this is a person who has opened leadership opportunities for others, particularly for women. Because at the time, we saw that women weren't identified as leaders, and we thought that we would be take this idea that it would be made known within our community, and within 10 years, everybody would get it and everything would be on a par. We wouldn't have the questions or the issue anymore. And of course, that isn't the case. It's taken women a long time, women and men, to recognize the leadership qualities that women bring. They are different. They are more collaborative. There's more intuitive capabilities that women bring to leadership. There's maybe less ego. If a person really knows who they are, they don't need constant strokes in order to understand their value and their worth. Those are some of the things that, and I'm generalizing, that women bring to leadership, but that it's not just for women. This is for everyone, because when we take the traditional model of leadership and put it together with the Athena model, it becomes, in my mind, the perfect sphere, the perfect combination of qualities that leadership comes from and arises from. So those are the things that I would say to you about what this model has done, what its impact has been, and how proud I am to have been part of being a spokesperson, finding my voice, and being able to breathe while I'm speaking, and recognize that I had some skills. I didn't have them all. It's okay. As long as I could meet someone who had the other kinds of skills and work with that person, we made the great team. And of course, collaboration is part of women's ways of leading.
Thank you for your kind words. It means a lot coming from you, Martha. And as a board member, I'm really energized by the footprint that's being created now with the ALM, the Athena Leadership Model, and the learning, the teachings. There are corporations adopting it. There are chambers of commerce adopting it. There are nonprofit associations adopting it. And I love that that footprint is extending from the classroom to the boardroom, if you will. That model applies across that entire sphere that span, and it's really energizing and exciting to see globally, not just individuals but organizations adopting the model and its principles. So it is the great work of your life. So I have one more question, if I may.
Okay.
This is a fill in the blank question, and it goes like this. It is, if God would let me, I would. And God is loosely used as like a higher power or something beyond you, or it could be anything. It could be time, spirit, universe, whatever word you want to insert there. If your higher power would let you, what would you do?
Well, I'm just going to go right back into follow up on what you just said, because if I had the opportunity, I would make this leadership model, the Athena Leadership Model, a part of every girl's education, every place on the globe. It is an empowering statement. Oftentimes women have to work especially hard to have a chance to do things, to be educated amply, to have resources to be able to follow their dreams. I would make this Athena Leadership Model a part of every girl's education. And I would suppose that as time went on, that they would be teaching their male colleagues as well, because as I'll say, this isn't just for women. It's a way to lead that encourages everyone to step forward and to find commonality and to gain their voice and to speak their truth. So I would love to have had a chance to do that. And thank you for asking that question. I also am reminded of a quote that I had been subjected to, I guess, is the way I'd put it. Back in 9th grade, when I was taking Latin, that shows you how old I am. They used to require 2 years of Latin in the school I was in. And there was a very short, small, quiet nun who taught Latin. And she used to walk back and forth, up and down the classroom desks, saying, with her hands behind her back, saying, "To thine own self be true. This above all." She was saying that. It was almost like she was mumbling. It took me until I was 40 years old to think back about what was she saying, Sister Jane Francis. This above all, to thine own self be true, was something that Shakespeare made known 400 and some years ago. So her words at the time didn't make any sense to me. It didn't mean anything, but they stayed in my mind and in my heart and in my consciousness. So I think that anything that we absorb along the way can be useful at some point. It'll come back up and you will be able to fulfill some part of yourself by pulling back the things that have most remained in your memory and in your consciousness. So I thank Shakespeare and Sister Jane Francis for that, not necessarily in that order.
And we do as well. And I can't think of a better way to end the interview. To thine own self be true. It's what a pleasure it has been. It's been an honor and a privilege, Martha, to have you on this interview series, the great work of your life. Ladies and gentlemen, Martha May Mertz, the founder of Athena International. You can find her on marthamertz.com and athenainternational.org. Again, it's been to be here today.
Thank you, Mary. You are a great inspiration to so many. I'm privileged to have had this conversation with you.